Welcome to the grand opening of the newest Calcium ice cream parlor. In the previous chapter, we visited their old location and highlighted all the effects of calcium channel blockers. In that scene, we included a record playing jukebox in the corner, reminding us that these agents have antiarrhythmic effects. They comprise the Class 4 antiarrhythmics, and what I want you to keep in mind here is that we'll be featuring the nodal calcium action potential. Class 1 and 3 agents are a little different. They're used for rhythm control and affect the cardiac action potential in the atria, ventricles, and His-Purkinje system. Class 2 and 4 agents, on the other hand, are for rate control at the SA and AV nodes. So we'll be featuring, again, two musical notes representing action at these cardiac nodes. You are in for a treat. To celebrate the opening of their 100th franchise location, the Calcium Ice Cream Shop has invited the world-famous Calcium Quartet to entertain the kids with their sweet four-part harmony. Let this quartet signify the Type 4 antiarrhythmics, the calcium channel blockers. These drugs block activated and inactivated L-type calcium channels, as indicated by the L-shaped nozzles that block the transmission of the soft-serve calcium. Recall from our calcium channel blocker overview video that the drugs specific for L-type calcium channels found in the heart are the non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. So we'll bring back our non-dairy sign from the other franchise location as a little reminder. And they even brought back their classic flavors, the two non-dairy returning favorites, Delicious Dark Chocolate and Very Vanilla, representing the two non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, diltiazem and verapamil. Since these drugs block activated and inactivated calcium channels instead of resting channels, they exert a greater effect on tissues that fire more frequently, and tissues that are exclusively activated by a calcium current. Yep, we're talking about the SA and AV nodes. Notice the two musical notes on the sheet music to emphasize the ability of these Class 4 antiarrhythmics to suppress activity at the nodes. Remember that unlike the cardiac action potential in the atria and ventricles, where the phase 0 upstroke is determined by a sodium current, the end of the gradual phase 4 depolarization and the phase 0 upstroke of the nodal action potential depends on calcium current. The action of suppressing SA and AV node activity is very similar to the effects of the beta blockers, which decrease beta adrenergic stimulation at the nodes. The nodal action potential will be affected in a similar way as well, so we've brought back the keyboard from the Beta Brass Club to portray these effects. Once again, I want you to imagine the keys leading up the piano as the gradual phase 4 depolarization, the upstroke of the keys as the phase 0 upstroke, and the keys slumping back down to baseline as phase 3 repolarization back to threshold. And in the same fashion as Beta Fitzgerald, this member of the Calcium Quartet slides his hand up the keyboard, pushing away that upstroke of the keys, and prolonging phase 4. Much like what we saw with the beta blockers, this decreased slope of the phase 4 pacemaker activity manifests in the SA node as a decreased sinus rate. The most dramatic effect, however, is at the atrioventricular node, causing a prolonged AV nodal conduction time and effective refractory period. As a throng of eager ice cream lovers swarms the ice cream machines, one kid climbs onto the heart-shaped light hanging from the wall to get above the crowd. Notice the bottom half of the heart hangs separated from the top, a symbol for the decreased conduction from the atria to the ventricles due to suppression of the AV node. Like the beta blockers, the non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers are particularly useful for treating supraventricular arrhythmias. Therefore, we've made the top of the heart lamp still illuminated, indicating the ability of Class 4 antiarrhythmics to suppress arrhythmias originating in the atria. Remember that nodal blocking agents, such as calcium channel blockers, can cause a prolonged PR interval on ECG, because conduction from the atrial P wave to the ventricular QRS complex is delayed. Well, to emphasize PR, we've brought in the public relations manager of the Calcium Ice Cream franchise, announcing the news of free ice cream for the first 100 customers. No wonder there's a riot. A prolonged PR interval is also the hallmark of heart block, as represented by this quartet member placing his shield-shaped hat over his heart. By depressing conduction through the atrioventricular node, diltiazem and verapamil can induce AV block when used in large doses or in patients with previous AV nodal disease. So careful when administering this drug to patients taking other drugs that impair AV nodal conduction, such as digoxin or beta blockers. There are a lot more side effects associated with calcium channel blocker therapy, so check out our calcium channel blocker overview sketch for more info. A specific supraventricular tachycardia that can be treated by class 4 antiarrhythmics is atrial fibrillation. So let's bring back our recurring sketchy symbol for AFib, an irregularly irregular static signal on a television screen, this time hanging from the ceiling of the ice cream parlor. Recall from the class 3 antiarrhythmics video that those agents were useful for treating AFib as well. In that scene, we illustrated someone pointing a remote at the irregular static screen, depicting conversion to a normal sinus rhythm. However, the first goal of treatment for AFib is not rhythm control, but control of ventricular rate, which can be accomplished by calcium channel blockers. When too many signals from the fibrillating atria are sent to the ventricles, this can lead to tachycardia, called a rapid ventricular response. By increasing the AV node refractory period, calcium channel blockers slow ventricular response rates in atrial flutter and fibrillation. Let this rate-controlling metronome sitting under the TV remind you of the use of calcium channel blockers for rate control in AFib. Alright, before we get trampled by these adolescent ice cream lovers, let's quickly sum up this scene. The non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, Very Vanilla Verapamil, and Dark Chocolate Diltiazem suppress SA and AV node activity, hence the cardiac notes on the sheet music. The shape of the keys depict the nodal action potential. L-type calcium channels are responsible for the end of phase 4 spontaneous depolarization, as well as the phase 0 upstroke. Remember that one of the quartet members slides his hand down the keyboard and pushes the action potential away, depicting prolonging the slow depolarization of phase 4. At the AV node, this leads to a dramatic decrease in conduction time, as the disconnected heart lamp suggests. This can prolong the PR interval and lead to other kinds of heart block. Class 4 antiarrhythmics are useful for treating supraventricular tachycardias, including AFib with rapid ventricular response. Slow down conduction to slow down heart rate. This does not fix the atrial fibrillation, remember. This is merely rate control, hence the rate-controlling metronome. This isn't the end of our antiarrhythmics chapter. There's one more class of antiarrhythmics, kind of like a class 5. What it is antiarrhythmics that don't really fit anywhere else. And where do they go? To the discotheque.